But Jackie, I think what I want to do, I think I want to like change this up a little bit. I think we should just get started because
Okay.
we can get the announcements out of the way, and and those who are listening want to welcome y'all for being. Some have been waiting before we came on, so we're gonna get started, and maybe we'll get more logged on. And besides that, we just have so much to talk about tonight. But to our viewers, good afternoon. It's so good seeing y'all again, and we're so thankful for you all being so faithful to us and actually following us each week. These series, the social justice series, has been very, very informative for everybody. We get quite a few comments back on it and asking us to continue doing this. But I do want to file a disclaimer for those who are viewing tonight. My son, who's a streamer, told me that eventually we'll start getting trolls. And trolls are people who actually come into your live streams to agitate you and to confuse the followers and to cause problems. It's much like with the Black Lives Matter protests. Outside agitators come in and they start tearing the buildings up and so forth, and people think it's the Black Lives Matter movement. So we're getting a little bit of that, which tells me that we are doing the right thing. So we're doing
Right.
the right thing.
Right.
So I do want to say again, good afternoon to you. I'm Dr. Willie Miles, the president of Dr. Willie Miles Children Foundation, located right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Even though we're located in Atlanta, Georgia, we have widespread appeal across the United States. So we have people from not every state, but almost every state who has actually viewing us, and they're actually beginning to follow us. So we're very excited about that. It's kind of interesting. Jackie, before I go any further, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Hampton Clements, educator, speaker, African enthusiast, culturalist.
All right. So I want to say, that we were saying that these topics are very exciting, and people are following us, and we're very excited that people do think that respect us enough to actually attend our live streams. But I do want to say that this is just the beginning, people. This is just the beginning. And Jackie and I have talked a lot about these live streams before actually coming on and talk about what's the whole purpose of them. We're not trying to cause um, we're not trying to develop a plan of action. We have plenty of plans of action. Our goal is to make the community aware of racism, to be aware of the Black experience, and to hear sort of like an inside story on where we've come from. That's why in the last couple of weeks, Jackie, we talked about, for the first week, we talked about the middle passage, which was very, very important.
Mm-hmm. We
And
did.
you want to talk, just give us a
Yes,
recap
yes.
on
And
that?
again, with all of these topics, as you mentioned, the goal is to have a conversation. These conversations are not being had, as far as we know, and certainly not being had enough. So again, this is education awareness, not we're not trying to skew anything one way or the other, but we just feel like these conversations are a beginning point.
And also, I think part of it, these conversations really are for anyone who's interested. The goal, there's just many Black people who are ill-informed as they are white and are non-Blacks.
Excuse me one moment.
Sure. So our goal is to make sure that we're giving information that is relevant to everyone, to give information that's relevant to anyone. But while we're still waiting, I want to give you some updates on what's happening with us. We're just so excited. The t-shirts are going extremely well. We'd like to ask you to actually go to our website, not tonight though. By Friday of next week, we have a new page that'll be up actually advertising those t-shirts. They're going extremely well across the country. And I'm asking people to wear those t-shirts like on October 15th and to actually post them on your Facebook or social media. But I also like to see y'all wear them in the voting lines if you're going to be voting in person. So we'd like to see y'all get out there and actually have our shirts on representing the organization and the campaign to save a generation. But though some of you have asked, the campaign to save a generation, it's kind of amazing. Y'all think it just started yesterday, but but Jackie reminded me that it's really started about 20 years ago when I had a campaign called Educate or Die, and was simply saying that education was so important, and if you didn't have that, you're going to be headed down a dead end road.
And that our
So,
children would be
mhm,
headed down a dead end road, which, again, was a big part of the point, even then, and of course now.
right. So Each week has been new information. Each week has been a conversation about our history. I know I'm sounding fragmented. Before I get there, though, I want to make sure we talk about don't forget to vote. Don't complain, vote. Don't argue, vote.
And Dr. Miles, let's add vote early. There is no reason for anyone to be under the pressure or to be facing, deciding between health and voting on election day. Just decide that you're going to get out there before the month of November, even comes. Please vote early. This is literally a matter of life and death.
Can I share with you, and I think that's very important. We'll take a little time to talk about that because that is part of our development, for lack of better words. I had an experience in ordering getting a absentee ballot. And what happened, of course, I'm in Georgia. I went online to get the ballot, and it kept telling me that the information did not match the database. I was saying, this is crazy. So I got kind of nervous. I said, wait a minute, I know there's nothing messy going on because I know I'm a registered voter. So I tried again, and it's on the state's website. It said the information does not match. So of course, I called our organizations that are actually working on voter issues, which is with Stacey Abrams, and they said, let me check it for you. So they checked this. Mr. Miles said, you're here, you're a registered voter. She said, we don't know why you're not able to get on the state's website, because that's the only website you can get on. So I said, well, let me try it again. Maybe I'm putting the wrong numbers in. Got it back again, folk. And guess what? No match. What we discovered is that if you use Explorer to try to get on, it says no match. If you use Google Chrome, you get right through. But the question is, how many people would do that?
Who would ever think that was the issue?
And you would think that on the state website that they would put a disclaimer that simply says, don't use Explorer. Well, the other piece of information the worker told me, which I thought was very interesting, she said, well, you're getting your absentee ballot now. She said, but by the time you get it, they say about 14 days. And the time you send it off, she said, maybe a little bit too late. And I said, well, how can I rectify this? She said, well, since you've already ordered it, she said, go to your polls and/or to your local registrar's office. Tell them, take the ballot with you, that you ordered the ballot, but you're not going to use it. And you'll just vote in person. And/or I could use that ballot and place it with them in their drop boxes. So
right.
My point, Jackie, is that people need to develop a plan.
And they need to execute that plan early.
But
you also make another point. Check your files. A lot of people don't realize people have been dropped. You're thinking, I've been registered forever. Surely they didn't mess with me. They will mess with anyone. They don't have preference. They don't even know who they're messing with. Please check early. It's going to be really sad if after the election so many people go, I had no idea, because we're really getting the word out.
Well, people, exercise your right that people died for. And this is not what our show is about, but it's about community awareness. We're not telling you who to vote for. We're just saying exercise your right to vote. All right? Do that for us. Do it for yourself. And do it to save a generation. All right? Let's get into the topic tonight. Jackie, very, very interesting tonight. Very, very interesting. And I know you're very excited to get started. And so am I. Every week has been absolutely wonderful. It's been very exciting.
And even the information that we find in the process of researching this is so interesting, and things that, even people like ourselves who are studying this all the time, you don't recall, you don't remember, and you're learning something new. So I'm excited about bringing this to the community tonight as well.
Well, we're going to get started. Racism, Black humanity ignored. And I know, Jackie, last week, I think you mentioned something like, we should not be denied. It should not be a denial. It is actually ignored. It is ignored. It's as if it does not even exist. So what we're going to do tonight is slow it down a little bit, and we're going to give you some definitions. We're going to talk about this thing slowly, because most of the stuff, we know racism exists, and we know some of the causes of it. But we're going to break it down a little bit more tonight so we can have a conversation, some dialogue about this. All right? Are you all ready?
And I think this is a good place to start. Like you said, using some definitions. So Black people have always occupied an ambiguous and at times non-existent relationship to meaningful citizenship rights. That statement is loaded.
Let's talk about that. No, break it down a little bit. Give me one part at a time so we can talk about.
Well, ambiguous.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
we're talking about Black humanity denied. We're talking about humanity denied, okay? Because
Hmm.
humanity is humanity. So at what point does a human become ambiguous?
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking, yeah, and I hear that very loud and clear. But I think that it is it's perspective and conceptual. And what I mean by that is that we are always the ones who say we love America, but America has never loved us back. And I've heard that all day today, and it's such a profound statement. And Joe Biden even said it today, and I almost fell on the floor. Is that it's ambiguous, Jackie. We have known that we had rights, and
Well,
we
I
have.
mean, think about it. The Voting Rights Act, speaking of
Mhm.
rights, of 65, it wasn't for other people, it was for us. We had to be given that right, whereas other people, other Americans, already had it.
And the question is why, though. And what concerns me is that you know
Ambiguous status.
it can be renewed. I mean, and so when does it become permanent? When do we have a permanent citizenship? Why are they still treating us like we're immigrants and we
Why are
apply
other
for a visa?
people born in the United States given citizenship and some of us born in the United States are not? And that is the issue. It is a question of humanity.
That's what it's
Are we
about.
human? Mm-hmm.
It's about humanity and being seen as human beings. And we talk about it being an ambiguous, and non-existent. How are you non-existent when
When you're
you're
here.
right here?
You're right. How are you non-existent?
How
But
are
in many ways, you are and you have been. And I think the fact that certain laws had to be created to acknowledge your existence was also an acknowledgement that you didn't exist without those laws, right? If I got to make a law that says you exist, then that means without it, people were not aware that you existed.
it's just amazing.
It is.
It says since its inception, the United States has denied Black people their civil and human rights, have denied us. And then people have the question to ask, why are you always so angry?
Or why do we have to say Black Lives Matter? I mean,
Exactly.
and get
Exactly.
upset with us when we do and declare that all lives matter, as if we would ever argue that point. Um, and civil rights are one thing. If we think about it, your civil rights, although they should be innate, are privileges. But when do human rights become questioned? When does a human not have the right to control themselves or raise their children, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Human rights should never be questioned.
Well, it's questioned only when it comes to Black people.
In America.
Only when it comes to Black people. Well, I'm going to share with you. Ready for this one?
Well, not just in America.
Not just Black people in America.
Right. That's true.
It's kind of amazing wherever you go. It seems like Black people are always on the lower end of the totem pole.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some Black person when I say that's not true. Some of them got great houses. Yeah, right. I'm not talking about
some of them are
those 3%.
billionaires.
I'm talking about those 3%.
3?
If that much. I'm talking about
generous.
the majority of Black people. Have you ever wondered why in every city you go in, that's an MLK street?
And it's usually in a poverty-stricken area.
Have you ever wondered why that occurs? Have you ever wondered why we just can't ever seem to get out of poverty? Are we that dumb?
Oh, why are all inner city schools Black schools?
So
how does that work exactly?
How does that happen though? Is that we just flock to those areas?
In every state in the union. I've always been amazed at the coincidence. Surely the states didn't all plan it, but yet it's there.
Well, maybe they did.
maybe
it's part of institutional racism.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's part of institutional racism. Now, people, please don't misunderstand the purpose of this. We're here denouncing racism in any form. But at this point, at the greatest magnitude of racism, it's Black people. Black people have always been the target. And folks, it's not a paranoia. There's much research on this from the Brookings Institute. There's much research in major universities. Jackie, right there in your state of Florida, FIU, you did some research on racism in the South. Okay. But before I go there, let's keep talking about this um,
Let's
this
talk. Yeah.
this black humanity denied, you know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the whys and how it came
Yeah.
about. So you're talking about unjustified discrimination. And I really think people need to let that marinate for a moment.
Hmm.
This is unjustified discrimination. So if it's unjustified, you have to ask, where did it come from then? How did it emerge? A belief or doctrine that inherent differences among
Hmm.
various human racial groups determine culture or individual achievement and more, usually involving the idea that one's own race is superior or has a right to dominate others, or that particular racial groups are inferior to others. So we have to, again, step back and ask the question, because a lot of us say we would really like to not have to deal with this issue. So why are we dealing with it? Where does it come from?
We know what's interesting, Jackie, is that we have dealt with this since we've been on these shores. But the phenomenal question is, how did we survive?
Mm,
You know, how did, out of all this stuff, we're still the most educated? How
mm-hmm,
out of all this suffrage and bondage and not speaking a language, how did we emerge to
mm-hmm.
still be a people?
To be
Um,
dominant in certain areas, or to at least just establish our humanity when there was an attempt to deny. Because at every step it was, well, maybe they can do this, but they can't do that. Well, maybe they can do this, but they'll never do that. Oh, well, maybe they could be okay at their schools, but they'll never achieve at our schools. Oh, well, maybe they can play basketball, but they'll never play golf. I mean, it just goes on and on and on about at every step being denied humanity, intelligence. And at every step, to your point, Dr. Miles, we've proven otherwise. And yet still,
we rise.
we rise and they continue to deny our humanity.
You know, it's so amazing that we are talking about that in the 21st century. You would think that we'd have a little bit more sophisticated conversation today. That's what you would think. You would think that we we would have arrived and to be equal. But one historian said that we're realizing that the past is
It's not
today.
the past. Right.
It's today.
That was Faulkner. He said, not only is not the past is, it said, not only the past isn't dead, it
Mhm.
isn't even past.
And it's just amazing. But you know, we talk about, like, Jackie, we talk about tonight like we are surprised by this, you know, but we've experienced it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point, and also why our conversations are so important.
Hmm.
Why are we still experiencing this? What is it really going to take to move our country, our nation forward? And as you were explaining the fact that this has always been the case, it really made me wonder, was there a time when we know we never arrived? We're aware of that. But was there a time when we were closer? Was there a time when, maybe there was more hope and more indications of progress, right? We
Hmm.
know there have been some obvious progress, but at the same time, has there? How far have we really come from, let's say, Jim Crow?
Well, you know what's interesting about that question you ask, and I'm sure many of our listeners are asking the same kind of question. And we invite y'all to ask the questions. But you know what's interesting? When we were separate, that
Hold on
kind of
now.
that kind of harmony existed. And we had our own banks, but then they came into those cities and burned the banks down and killed the people in city after city.
Banks and
So this
business.
is not, you know, the answer is, has it? While we can't, the answer is yes, we did do it. But psychologically, what happens, they show you, they meaning it was white people, that said that if you do this, this was going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we had flourishing banks.
And so, what is our system, our government that declares protection for all? How is it that we have a government then that does not protect the rights of its citizens when they are attacked? Now we have this new terminology of what do we call them? Terrorists.
Mhm.
And domestic and non-domestic. So we recognize that a person can be an American and be a terrorist if they're attacking our country. But we don't recognize that when they're attacking certain citizens.
But you know, it's amazing. You asked this question though, and I want to I want to talk about how it happens and why does it keep happening. And that answer is institutional racism. It's institutional racism. And the institutional racism starts with the institutions.
Mm-hmm.
It's government. It is built-in laws that's going to keep you and keep a certain people subjugated to those who are superior.
Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of times when that comes up, Dr. Miles, people want to say that these policies, if you will, systems and governments, well, they're not written. You know, they're just kind of ingrained. But many of them are written.
They are written.
There are still some laws on the books that do not guarantee us all equal rights, right? And
Right.
equal humanity. So they are written. And you have to ask, you know, even when we look at police brutality, we have to ask when and where did any officers, let alone so many, get the impression, the idea, the audacity to think that they could take the life of a human, let alone an American citizen, and that it would be okay.
But you have to understand, though, they're not taking the life of a human, though. In
Well,
their mindset,
they
they're
may not perceive that. And that
right.
is, again, the purpose for our conversation.
Right.
And the reason for that topic. I mean, what human doesn't recognize another human? You know, and I developed this phrase that only animals kill humans.
Yeah, I just asked you, and again, you know, we get sort of emotions involved in this because being a Black male in this modern society, you know, high blood pressure, it ain't cause I'm fat. Well, it ain't the only reason, but it's hypertense because just to leave the house, I got to worry about if I'm going to be stopped by a police officer. And
or
then,
a regular citizen.
If you ain't doing nothing, what you worry about? What are you talking about?
Right. How many were not doing anything?
Not doing anything and are dead.
Are dead.
Right.
And this is daily life.
When I look at the scenes of brutality when it comes to people, to Black people, my question is, if I replace that human being with a dog, the society will be outraged.
Mm-hmm. You know, we pointed out last week that and we do have a question that I want to address. We pointed out last week that the organization that protects animals is called the Humane Society. But humans can't get the same treatment.
Yeah.
So there is a question about, can there be another Black Wall Street, Dr. Miles?
Well, you know, Jackie, what's interesting, you know, that is a loaded question because we can have what we want to, but I think the Willie Lynch letters in full speed these days. I mean, there have been many Black churches who try to do Black things, but Black folk don't trust Black people.
Amen.
We don't trust Black people. Oh, I'm not putting my money in that Black bank because they ain't federally insured, which they are. You know, and so the point is, when those Black banks started back in those days, there was a trust system, and there was a system of, the only way I can get out of my situation is by working with you. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're going to look at my best interest. You're not going to be for your own selfish gain. That's how those banks thrived.
But it's also this concept that Harriet Tubman faced. I could have saved so many more if only they knew they were enslaved.
Exactly.
We could do so much more if we only knew our true status and who we were, who we are. We just don't. We don't realize that not trusting Black is something that was instilled in us through a very brutal system. We don't realize that even today, you know, any business you start has competition. So as a Black business owner, you're certainly going to come up against competition. So how easy is it to have even your people not support you because you aren't as good as?
You know what's amazing to me, Jackie, when I hear those kinds of questions, and I try to remain calm on the outside, but my body rages on the inside because I love us. Doesn't mean I hate anybody else.
Right.
And I said that we don't see the potential. But let's take a look at the amount of beer Black people buy. Beer.
Well, that's just one.
You're talking about billions of dollars. Can we open a bank up? Well, you're giving Budweiser. I'm not knocking Budweiser. I'm simply saying You're giving them billions of dollars.
Oh, it's
Of
not just
course we
here,
can
Dr.
do it.
Miles.
Hmm?
As a business owner, I've done some research, and African American consumers out-index, I mean, we outspend the mainstream community in most major areas.
Most areas.
Cars, homes, appliances,
Cigarettes,
uh,
clothing.
clothing, travel. We out-index. Let's not even talk about shoes
But we're making
and
lower
running
then.
gear,
But our income is lower. But
but we
collectively,
outspend them. And they know this. And so many things are targeted towards you because they know you're spending that money. And yet they turn around and they have no respect for your community, no inclination to support your youth sports or anything. They take your money and they go support things in their community.
but people, you're making those decisions. Nobody's making you do that. And you have to have a consciousness. But I want, Jack, I want to like make sure that we stay framed, for lack of
Right.
better words. We talked about Black humanity. We talked about racism. And I think we talked about racism at length. We talked about institutional racism. And let's go back a little bit. Can we do that? And just
Yes.
talk about some more institutions that perpetuate racism from a subliminal perspective. It doesn't look like it, but it sure does feel like it.
Well, one of the major ones there is the history of the U.S. government, and the role that it has played. But I want to read this for a second so that
Sure.
people understand what we mean when we say institutional racism.
Mm-hmm.
The policy, system of government, etc., that is associated with or originated in such a doctrine that favors members of the dominant racial or ethnic group. And see, we could stop there and look at many job applications. You know how they ask, are you a member of this? Would you prefer not to say? If it didn't matter, we wouldn't, one, have to say, and two, we wouldn't have the option of saying, would you rather not say? That's there because sometimes we know that if we say what our race is, maybe those applications are thrown out. That is what institutional racism is. That is recognizing that you putting this on an application, right, could harm your chances of getting that job. And this is a common practice in our country.
But you and I experienced that, and I'm sure all of our listeners have experienced this on everyday jobs. We see oftentimes our white colleagues with less experience and less education end up supervising us. So I don't care.
Well, not only do they supervise us, we end up training them to supervise us.
Exactly.
I've seen that many times.
And so when you see that kind of stuff, you cringe and say, "Wait a minute. Now that ain't no." She didn't work for that position. I mean, she had a friend who knew a friend who knew the boss, and this supervisor got in, less credentials, no years of experience.
Dr. Miles, I have seen that personally. I've seen a woman with 2 master's degrees and 12 years of experience replaced with someone who doesn't have an AA degree of another race. I've seen that in the last 12 months. Replaced with someone who had no AA degree, no experience whatsoever in this capacity, and walked into a job making $55,000 a year when the person prior, a Black female, had to have all of those other credentials to even be considered.
So even when we learn to play the rules of the game, the rules don't matter because they change the rules.
Well, the rules only apply to us.
They don't apply to us.
Right.
Good point.
The other people don't have to jump through those hoops. They don't need the degrees or the experience.
But Jackie, you know some of my plight. It's like, and we're talking about racism, folk.
Institutionalized racism.
We're talking about
the people who did that would not say that they're racist.
I'm talking about I have a doctorate. I have to tolerate seeing people come in on jobs around me who just graduated from Georgia State or Georgia or UG. They end up in higher level positions 3 levels above me.
No experience, no credentials.
I applied for the job. And I'm just trying to figure out
how.
Oh, I just need more experience. After 30 years of experience at executive level, I need more experience. So I'm saying these are the kind of things we're talking about. But Jack, we cannot preclude that sometimes Black people are partners in that mess because they only care about keeping their high-level jobs.
All part of the psychological impact, all part of the Willie Lynch concept and theories. And again, if we don't learn, read, and acknowledge that these things are part of our culture, environment, existence, history, and present day, we can't address them. Of
Well,
course,
what's
look
more
at how
important?
many times we see, and this was something that was going on a lot, I think in the 60s and 70s, when they start hiring uh, people of African descent to head HR departments. What better gatekeeper can there be? So when someone isn't hired, mind you, they weren't necessarily, they're not the ones making the decision. They're just the ones who have to tell you when you don't get the job.
Yeah.
So you put a black person over HR so you can say, oh, well, clearly there was no discrimination because there's a black person over HR, knowing that the people above them were the ones who actually made the decisions. So there are a lot of strategies out there that are being used, again, seemingly focused on keeping a certain segment of the population segregated and under control.
You know, it's kind of amazing you ended by saying that we talked about institutional racism is designed to preserve the social status, the economic status, and political power of the dominant group.
And truth be told, they kind of want you to go along and accept it without question. You know, how does anyone justify some of George Floyd? How does anybody justify that and not expect a response? Are we not supposed to respond when you literally just killed a man on the street? Okay. And I understand, Dr. Miles, there was another recent one in the last 24 hours. A young man who had broken up a dispute resolved, approached the police, hands up, saying everything's great, and he's no longer with us.
I haven't heard that one. You know what city it happened in?
I don't recall. I did see it on CNN early this morning.
All right, so folks, if y'all seen that story, I haven't seen it today. I've been, of course, on MSNBC, and I've been, of course, working, so I've not had a whole lot of time to see it. I normally hear breaking news, but all of those are vestiges of racism. And it's only now are we willing to call it what it is.
I mean, we kind of have to. We're in a state of emergency. That's another issue. Do we realize we're in a state of emergency? Are we in a state of denial that this is going to be, quote unquote, isolated and go away? I think
but haven't we always been in a state of emergency?
Well, yes.
It's always been that
in this country.
But we've had our leaders to tell us differently. And now we have young people who ain't tolerating this stuff. And what is happening, they're finally seeing the light. They're seeing what racism is because, again, I teach college level and I do a whole lot of other involvement with young people. And I would ask them questions, do you think racism exists? They said, no. We go to the same restaurants. I can marry them. So you can marry them mean that racism does exist.
Not realizing you can also die from marrying them, but.
You know, it's just, I mean, it's encouraging to me that as a society of people, we are now emboldened enough to say, I'm Black and I'm proud and mean it. And now that I'm Black and I'm proud.
Dr. Miles, too, do we not get to demand as American citizens that we get all the protections of the Constitution? I mean, I don't hear people talking about that a lot. I mean, do you deny that I'm an American citizen? One. And as such, do you deny that I'm entitled to the protections of the same Constitution that protects others?
And I want to make you aware of that our institutions are designed to preserve the social status, the economic status, and political power of the dominant people. So where it takes to do that
is what they do.
So as far as we're concerned, I'm talking about you're of no value.
Oh, watch it now. You're of value as long as you can continue to funnel my education system with my economic system with your purchases. Low education means low wages. So as long as I can use you to keep my economic machine going, you have value.
But you know what it is? But you know what's kind of strange about that, and it's almost like a mental illness. You want to suggest that they do see value in us that way. They don't even see a value us that way because they don't respect what we do. We still feed a capitalistic society that makes 3% rich. But if you valued me, you'd make sure I'd have more to spend. You'd make sure that I want to keep you alive a little bit longer. But that's wishful thinking. That's
Mm.
wishful thinking. But the whole purpose of racism is to maintain the status quo.
And Dr. Miles, I think this is a good time to mention that the miseducation, because we've talked about a
Mhm.
few things that we have been miseducated, we don't often, address the fact that that miseducation is also applied to mainstream America. And that to me is where the danger lies. They don't, they aren't aware that they are miseducated. They have beliefs that, like anyone taught anything as a child and growing up, you have no reason to question those beliefs. They
Mhm.
believe that we're different. They believe that there's a certain order. They believe we should be happy as second class citizens. And that is why, again, their actions are what they are. And then, of course, you have the extreme right, who, as you point out, they don't even recognize that we're human. And they feel that they're entitled to literally control the lives of other human beings. Now, I don't know if there's a name for that disease, but clearly that is an illness.
Crazy.
A person's inability to recognize another human being. Then let's call it crazy. Let's identify
But you
it
know
as
what?
such and figure
Yeah,
out what you do with it.
yeah, this just came across my mind to my we're second class citizens. I'd like to be the second class, but I don't think we're second
Ah,
class. I really don't. I don't think we're second class. I think that white women are second class,
I agree.
third class, maybe
Hmm.
black women.
Hmm. And
And
let's not forget, white immigrants hold a higher position than we do.
everyone holds a higher position than we do.
I don't know if people realize this. So in our most public education systems, public school districts, they make accommodations for people who don't speak our language.
Hmm.
And they get all kind of accommodations. But you're not accommodating us by making sure that we are learning our own culture.
Well, because
But
they
we
see
learn their culture all the time.
because they see a greater value in those people, and that's why I think that black people have to start seeing value in ourselves.
They
Start
most
seeing value
certainly
in
have to start
ourselves.
there.
And it's sort of like genocide when you hate yourself. I mean, you hate yourself. Why are you expecting anybody else to care about you?
That's a whole nother that's a whole nother session
So, and
because
sometimes
that's
people
real.
people always want to bring up to my, oh, when a white person kills a person, you want to raise hell about it. But when a black person kills a person, well, that's not the story. Because historically, black folk ain't killed black folk, but historically, white folk have always killed black people, and we have the documentation and historical references to prove that.
Hmm.
So,
And be careful where you get the other information that tells you otherwise,
exactly. So
because
I think
that's
it's
that's that's a yeah.
But so I think we can like take a little pause here that we are acknowledging that racism still exists and that until institutions change, we don't change. It's institutional racism. Institutional. Those systems are designed to keep us oppressed and suppressed.
So I have a tough question for you, Dr. Miles.
I don't know if I can answer it.
What do you think must come first in order for change? Our acceptance of ourselves or their acceptance of us?
I think it can happen simultaneously
Okay.
because if you do that, it's going to be up to another 50 years.
50.
Because I got to convince us that we good, first of all.
Yeah, good luck with
I got to
that.
convince us that you can trust me.
Hmm.
I got to convince you that I don't want you being a black person judging me by the color of my skin.
Mm.
Are you
Yep.
with me? So we have a lot of work to do
We
ourselves,
have to work on both
but
sides.
that's in-house stuff.
Hmm.
We don't tell people what's going on inside our house. That's
Hmm.
in-house stuff.
Hmm.
What we need to do is, and I think some of our politicians have alluded to this, but I ain't dependent on politicians, and that is that we must start looking at the institutions
That
that are
consistently,
supposed to be
yes. That's
favoring
a very
all
good
of
point.
us.
Yes.
When
If
when
we can't
institutional
control
change
the
occurs,
individuals, but we can question the institutions. That's a very good point.
yeah, exactly. We got to change it. But I think, and some people say I may be wishful thinking, but I do think America's on the flip at this point. And the flip simply means that it cannot go on any longer the way it has been. Because guess what? Everything has been exposed.
And
It's been
continues to be exposed. That's
it's
very true.
exposed now.
Yeah.
And so at this point, there has to be a reaction to it.
Hmm.
Um, it's and Jackie, I don't think it's every white person who
Oh, absolutely not.
opposes us.
No.
I think it's some old school jokers.
not just old school, but I think it is a minority. I just think that
Hmm.
that minority, because they're in a system of systematic racism, their environment of systematic racism, they get more leverage and they get more leeway than they really should have. I do think it's a small group. You know, I have said often, I live in a community that is not predominantly Black, but at the same time, I have gentlemen who are not Black who hold doors for me, complete strangers. I've
Hmm.
been stopped by, you know, officers who were courteous and respectful. So I agree with you. It is not everyone by any means, nor has it ever been. But again, evil thrives when good people do nothing,
Hmm.
and so that evil is alive and well in the United States.
Yeah, there was one question as to how does racism affect Black people? And the data says, the research, all the research says it harms Black people the most throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the world. So wherever there's racism, it's going to be some Black folk there. And it's going to harm us. But not only does it harm us, it harms our children, it harms the next generation and future generations.
Mm-hmm. And that's undeniable and unavoidable,
Hmm.
which is something else we need to realize. You know, you can't have an illness that you don't spread to the next generation if you don't wipe it out.
I'm telling you. It's just amazing. Let's give our audience some time to type in some questions if you have, and give us some feedback. Are we hitting home? Are we sharing some information that you've not heard before? Let us know. We want to hear from you. We don't want to think you're asleep out there. So I know you're listening, but start texting us. Let us know that you're out there and that you're agreeing with us or you're not agreeing with us, and so forth.
I just want to know if the audience thinks that racism is a problem in America today now. And I want to put that aside from all the police incidents that we're dealing with.
Hmm.
Because now we look to that one group. Is
Right.
it a problem in America?
That's the question posed to you. Is it a problem in America? You know, Jackie, the Brookings Institute, they did a study and they wrote a document on this, not really just a document, it's on systemic racism in America today. And what they threw out there, it was just so amazing. It says that slavery is America's original sin.
Mm-hmm.
Slavery is America's original sin. Now, it doesn't mean there ain't no more sins, but slavery is the one that stands out. And it says it was not solved by the framers of the Constitution, nor was it resolved by the horrendous conflict that was of the American Civil War. The most
True.
hateful remnants of slavery persist in the U.S. today in the form of systemic racism baked into nearly every aspect of our society and who we are as a people. It says baked in.
And Dr. Miles, you mentioned two major events: the framing of the Constitution and a war that still did not wipe this out.
Mm-hmm.
A Constitution that is, let's face it, it's beautifully written. It really shapes how the
It
world views
does.
America,
Mm-hmm.
because it says we have inalienable rights and that all men are created equal. And we know that injustices don't just happen here in the United States. So people have looked to the United States as that beacon of place where, you know, what we think is right exists.
Mm-hmm.
But yet that Constitution and the Civil War has not taken these things, this sins, from America.
But I'm a therapist also, Jackie, and with some of my patients, I talk about being on the cycle of anxiety, which means that one, they know they're anxious, right? And then they think they're getting better, and we call it avoidance. And then what happens? They get back on that cycle, and it ends up being worse than the way it started out.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I sort of like see an analogy here that with Black folk, we sort of deny that racism exists because we can buy a car now and because we can get houses and live beside people. Don't realize you're still in the racist cycle.
But Dr. Miles, I don't think it's just Black people. I think a whole lot of non-Black people bought that as well. Because again, that's why they're not active, because they think, well, racism is gone. I mean, look, we live next door. Like you said, you can buy this and our kids go to, and I've had neighbors say this, they believe that racism doesn't exist.
Because you're allowed to live in their communities.
Because it's not something that they would experience. There's no way they would actually know.
And we most certainly ain't gonna tell them because we have arrived.
Right. Let's not you know,
We ain't gonna talk about our ancestors
let them know
because
that we're still
I
being
live where you live
subjected
at
to.
now. And I don't want you to know about that because that's in the past.
Because I'm trying to be like you. I have to be equal to you. Therefore, I couldn't be experiencing something that you're not experiencing. I mean, I'm too good for that, right?
Yeah. People, these are noted institutions that I'm talking about. All of our references are documented, so it's not something we're making up.
Right.
And we're talking about noted scholars and noted institutions that talk about racism. You know, I used to wonder why is it that Black folk can't ever seem to get out of situations? I mean, I'm not blaming institutions totally because it's part of your mindset. I'm saying that when you have institutional racism and things that are baked in to keep you out of something, guess what? It's done. And I find that oftentimes people judge us based upon how we talk.
Oh
No,
my!
if you Black and talk educated, then I can deal with it because you are you're
different.
You did.
Ooh, you speak properly. Where are you from?
No, you speak good English like us, whatever that means.
As if they actually do.
And so you get some privileges.
Oh my! You one of the good ones. I mean, we're laughing and joking about this, but we're laughing and joking because the point is that it is sad that these are the things that
and
allow them to judge
and we don't help it. Part of our resume is that we're the only Black on the floor.
Oh,
we're the only Black in the company.
In the building, first this, first that. And what's sad is that there's some of us who don't want there to be a second. You know, we enjoy being the only.
But what's sad, Jackie, is that we tell our children, I don't want y'all dealing with no Black folk. Black folk tell their Black children, I don't want you to deal with Black people now. You deal with them white children, and because they smart and not only smart, but they got some connections, and you need those connections.
Okay, Dr. Miles, you're about to hit a sore spot for me now.
So, I don't want you talking no Black children that because I mean those Black because Blacks, it's just we do more harm to ourselves.
Going to Black colleges, now that is still very prevalent. Our best and brightest are told not to go to our universities. Despite the fact that historically, our best and brightest came out of our universities.
You're trying to start some stuff, and this is about racism now. It is sad. Now, my body is so tense right now. It is sad when you ask a 12th grader, are they going to an HBCU? And they say, what is that?
Dr. Miles, you're hitting on my area now. Everything I do is focused on
They say, what is that?
What is an HBCU? Yep. Somehow we do 12 years of school in America, and you don't know what an historically Black college or university is. And unfortunately, it's not just high school students who are saying that. I've had adults go, oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
And the parents tell the kids, you ain't got no Black college?
Big time. Big time. Oh, you're not going to go over there? No. You too smart.
So they're feeding right into the institutional racism.
Their own oppression. They're feeding into their own oppression. And as a person who attended an historically white university, you do not realize what you are subjecting that child to in that environment. Yes, they smile and they're very friendly. And oh, we are so welcoming. And yes, there's a Black student union and club and organization and everything. And behind the scenes, let's keep in mind, those tenured professors, many of whom were there, have been there 40 years. You guys better go back 40 years and see what was happening in this country. Those professors have not changed their minds. Those advisors, again, institutionalized racism. My friends and I who attended these universities have stories to tell. Advisors who would not allow you to take courses you wanted to take. So be careful. But yes.
Because you ain't smart enough. Because you ain't smart enough.
You ain't smart enough. Okay. And let's not talk about first generation.
our time is almost run out, but we got to talk about this right here. We got to talk about the South. We got to talk about the reasons why white people in Southern states still have a higher rate of bias against Black Americans. Before I tell you, do you have an answer to that? I want to, before I actually talk about it. Why are Southern states still have a bias toward racism?
I'm torn on that, Dr. Miles. I'm torn. I'll be honest with you. I feel like I've experienced more overt racism outside of the Southern states.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there was so much turmoil in the Southern states that a lot of growth came out of it. I also think the fact that in many of the Southern states, Blacks are a majority in many cities. So it changes the landscape a bit. But we do know that those who practice this racism the most and pass it on are very much still within the Southern states. So,
well, I'm gonna give you the answer,
yes,
and it's gonna make sense. The reason the bias is there is because they had more slaves and they have more investment of Black folk there, and it's more ingrained. I like the way one historian framed it, that racism is baked in, and when something is baked in, it's hard to break down a cake when it's been baked.
Right, can't separate it.
And that's where the phrase came in: the cake is baked.
Right.
If your mama told you that, that meant you can't be changed. Something wrong with you.
Yeah.
So that the cake is baked.
Can't separate the ingredients anymore.
It's done.
You can't tell one from the other.
So the reason we still have these vestiges of racism in the South is because they were, of course, they were known for being slave colonies, for lack of better words. So wherever
the Civil War was the North versus the South,
so
the South wanted to maintain the systems.
Wherever there were more slaves, that's where the vestiges still occur. And that's why, Jackie, when you still go to Mississippi and Alabama, all these other southern states, you see some people still act like slaves. They still saying yawsome.
Dr. Miles.
They are.
Of course, it's been many moons since I attended the university that I attended, but I did experience that in this small town. I think I was at a JCPenney's, and the people of color, of course, I was a college student, and then there were, people who'd grown up there and just, lived there, adults, literally waited behind the white people to check out and do things. And I'm looking around like, what is going on here? Of course, this was in the 80s, but yes.
I'm gonna give you something more modern. My son works in Laurel, Mississippi. He told me he went into a place, it was run by an Asian, to get some Asian food. The guy told him, you cannot sit in here. You can only order to take it out because of coronavirus. But he sent me a picture of white people, 10 white people sitting down. He said, Dad, he said, wait a minute. He said, I said, Jeffrey, you're in the South.
You're in the South.
And I said, first of all, if somebody treats you that way, why you want to eat their food?
Thank you.
Get out of there.
Dr. Miles. Put something in the window. Don't want Black money. I mean, I don't want to force my money on you. But they won't do that. I wish they would all do it. Put it on your truck. Put it on your desk at the bank. Please. Like, help us out. Let us know that you don't want our money.
Well, people, I do want to share with you that our time is worn out. And, I don't like saying I had a great time talking about racism, but I do want to say that, that we enjoy enlightening people and enlightening anyone. That's what education is all about. And our whole purpose is to remind you of something that we thought was dead, but it isn't.
That never died.
It never died. And it keeps, the resurrection keeps occurring with it. So again, we really want to thank y'all for being on with us. Next week we'll be on again. We're having, this is a 5-part series. We're going to take a break after this and bring some other subjects in. We'll come back again around Christmas or the first of the year, talking about social justice again. But Jackie had a very good point for me yesterday. She was saying that, my goal for the foundation is to actually fund small projects throughout the country. Now, folks, we ain't got no money, trust me. I'm a believer. But she said we can even do something small. And folks, we need y'all to help us. We would like to fund projects up to $500, and for anybody who wants to do social justice. But to do that, somebody asked, can we start a Black bank? Well, the foundation is not just for Black people, but you can start with us.
Mm-hmm.
If you donate to us, we're putting that money right back in the community. So we're not keeping it. We're saying if you give donation to us, we're giving it right back to you. We want to fund one project before this year is out for
Mm-hmm.
$200 to $500. We're going to ask you all to donate to us, and we'll let you know and people, we want to do something where it's not required to jump through hoops to get this money.
Mm.
Okay, we're not trying to do all that. We're not trying to be government. We
We're
want to see what's
supporting what's
working.
already out there.
Yeah, we want to see what's working out there, and what can you do to help our communities, not only just our communities, but all communities,
Exactly.
on informing them on social justice. Now, I'd like to fund 4 projects to start out January 1st. That is $2,000. Ask your employers, donate to us. I like to have those funds so we can actually advertise. We're going to fund 4 community projects by January 1. I am also seeking out other foundations who I found out who has given money to social justice. One has been Nike. There are many, many more, billions of dollars. I'm looking at how to access those funds, because our organization wants to be an organization that distributes funding to other small organizations.
To support the work that's going out there, right?
Exactly.
Duplicated.
So listen, do this for us as quickly as you can. Donate to us. We want to fund 4 projects of about $500 for social justice throughout this country. And again, eventually we'll be funding 50,000, 100,000, and millions. We're actually trying to meet with corporations now to talk about how they can fund us, to use us to distribute their funding. That's what we want to be.
And let's not miss, Dr. Miles, in case they're wondering, that the foundation is a 501c3. It is a nonprofit, a charitable organization, so the donations can be deducted. We're coming to the end of the year. Some of you need some things to write off for taxes.
Very good.
We are the place to do that, because a lot of our organizations, whether they're not large enough or don't hear, have a hard time being competitive, especially the smaller ones, and we want to support those organizations.
Jackie, we gotta go. Hey, folks, we love y'all. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Hey, be safe and plan to vote. Have a great evening.
Have a good evening, Dr. Miles. Have a good evening, audience.